The most pleasant occasion was the time of masked dancing at the monastery, where the monks danced and all the people, young and old, came dressed in their best. We picnicked in beautiful grassy lands, and people brought all sorts of food to eat, like cheese and milk and meat. This went on for 6 or 7 days, with people dancing, singing songs, and competing in horse riding.
This awe-inspiring land gave birth to one of the most spiritual cultures the world has ever known.
Prayer was part of one's daily life. Even in the most humble tent, you would find a shrine. We in the West, of course, regard time as, I suppose, basically as something to be used. We've always got to be doing something, whereas any Tibetan would always give some time of the day set aside for prayer, for contemplation.
For thousands of years, Tibetan shamans performed rituals to appease the wrathful deities of their land and to communicate with an unseen world. "1,200 years ago, Tibet was a land of warrior kings and fierce tribes who forged a sprawling military empire which reached across much of Central and South Asia and even captured the ancient Chinese capital of Xi'an. In one of the most remarkable revolutions in human history, Tibet's fearsome armies and the bloodthirsty deities they worshipped were transformed into protectors of a faith dedicated to the pursuit of inner peace. Buddhism originated in India, where 500 years before the birth of Christ, a young prince gave up a life of riches to understand the misery and death he found outside his palace walls. After years of meditation, he announced that he had discovered a way to freedom from the endless cycles of worldly suffering. He became known as the Buddha, or Awakened One.
Buddha did not found a religion. Buddha founded an educational movement. Buddha's discovery, his enlightenment, was that human beings, if they make an effort to understand themselves, they can get rid of their negative tendencies and they can develop to an unlimited degree their positive tendencies. When they do that, they can genuinely become happy. So the Buddha's real teaching, his real announcement was that freedom is possible. I have attained it. You can attain it. in Tibet, and only by the 17th century, after 1,000 years of Buddhism in Tibet, did the monastery take responsibility for a government. The king disbanded the army, the king became a monk, and therefore without heredity, reincarnation became the vehicle of succession.
The Dalai Lama, whose title means Ocean of Wisdom, became the spiritual and political leader of the Tibetan nation.
The Tibetan people believe the Dalai Lama to be the embodiment of the principle of compassion, the reincarnation of a bodhisattva who has vowed to be reborn in the world to help and to guide those he has been teaching in previous lives, who is both committed to the destiny of Tibet and has worked for that over many lifetimes. Someone who sustains the whole culture of the land.
The Tibetans were a very independent people. They didn't always see eye to eye with the Lhasa government. Yet they all owed allegiance to His Holiness the Dalai Lama. They fervently believed in their God-King, in their religion.
Tibet's unique form of Buddhism was propagated in the largest monastic universities the world has ever seen. Every Tibetan family had a close relative who was a monk or a nun.
85% of the national budget of Tibet was spent on supporting the curriculum of the monastic universities, and 10% of the population were in those monastic universities. This would be the equivalent in the United States as if the whole of the defense budget were put into the education budget. Enlightened people was what they were trying to produce. Of course, that doesn't mean that every Tibetan monk was enlightened. Many were not. It doesn't mean that every Tibetan was enlightened. Naturally, many were not. But it means that a very high core percentage of the educated and the highly developed ones were enlightened. This enlightenment radiates into every corner of the culture. This is why Tibetan culture is so beautiful. Tibetan culture is so inspiring to people. It has so much color. Its festivals are so marvelous. It keeps alive primitive energy.
Even today in Tibet, you will find that religious festivals continue to go on. And many of these festivals describe the victory of Buddhism over the local indigenous religions, but not in a way that suppresses or denies those indigenous forms. They're still part of the Tibetan life.
Tibetans think of religion as a source of fun. The real thing that either brings them happiness or causes them trouble is their own behavior.
Tibetans have a tremendous body of spiritual knowledge, a spiritual technology, if you will, that is an immense gift to human learning. They have preserved in their monastic universities a vast corpus